Well, the concept of physical literacy and what exactly is that depends on who you ask. It is a term that I think a lot of people have gravitated to because it speaks to a broader segment of the population, not just sport pipeline, sport development. It speaks to healthy, active lifestyle. And the term itself isn't focused in any one particular segment of a local community. It's not just sport clubs. It's in schools. It's in preschool. It's in daycare. It's in park and recreation programs. It's a term that tries to encapsulate an approach that wants to provide opportunities for kids, especially in the ages of 0 to 12, environments and opportunities for them to develop fundamental movement skills, fundamental sport skills in a variety of different community settings. The origins of the term go back to Margaret Whitehead in the United Kingdom. She was credited with coming up with the term. The Canadian Sport for Life model has very much utilized physical literacy as a term. I've included on a handout in front of you a definition that I have kind of gravitated to that reads like this. Physical literacy is the development and mastering of fundamental movement skills and fundamental sport skills that permit a child to read their environment and make appropriate decisions, allowing them to move confidently and with control in a wide range of physical activity situations. It is the foundation of both long-term participation and performance to the best of one's abilities. Ideally, physical literacy is developed prior to the adolescent growth spurt. So the key element for me that's resonated with this is it speaks to both participation as well as improved performance. And that is, for my world of running Olympic venues after their 3-week big event, it allowed me to create coaching curriculum and a philosophy of an approach to programs that use Olympic facilities, not just for elite level training, but also for how we engage Utah's youth in winter sport and how we properly bring and attract participants into a wide variety, all ages, all abilities. So if we look at I always am a visual person. If you take the traditional pyramid, it inherently says as you develop through the pipeline, you're kicked out of the system. If you don't make the development team or the sub-elite team, you're out of the sport. And I think Tom used the word squaring the pyramid. The rectangle there that you see it shows from 0 to 12 basic fundamental skill development in youth as the basis, the foundation for whether you're on the path to excellence. You still have the little pyramid there for those that are in that. But for the bulk of the population, 100% of the population, most of it will be kicked out to remaining competitive in the sport, whether you're a master's level athlete or just recreationally involved in the sport, or whether you're an official, you remain active and engaged. And that really speaks to what resonates for me about what physical literacy can represent. It's very inclusive, it's very collaborative, and it has terminology and a vocabulary that resonates, again, to a broader group of the population. It's again, not just focused in any one area. However, we view there should be actions taken more in not just sport clubs, NGBs, but in schools and in physical education and in park and recreation programs, health organizations, to be involved in a dialogue in the community of how we properly motivate and incent parents and participants to engage in these activities. On that sheet, physical literacy talks about fundamental movement skills, and those are anything from running, jumping, swimming, sliding, cycling, skating, to body-oriented skills of agility, balance, coordination, rhythm, object skills of sending, throwing, kicking, striking, or receiving skills, catching, trapping, in all environments, on the ground, in the air, on ice and snow, in the water. Those, as parents, and being a parent of 3 boys, 10, 8, and 6, I think it's an obligation as a parent to expose a child to a variety of these environments and to allow them to feel comfortable in doing those and providing anything from swimming lessons to learning to skate. Those provide such a positive confidence building skills and life lessons through sport. Those are the aspects that resonate for me with this, all with desired outcomes of lifelong participation in sport or physical activity and improved performance. So a couple of the ideas, a work group that is still developing for this, and I would encourage anybody who would like to participate in that to contact me.
I didn't properly I didn't properly thank Colin. One of the outcomes of the Aspen Summit in April was there was tremendous enthusiasm around the idea of physical literacy and how it might both support the health of our society broadly, as well as any type of role it might play within any age-appropriate LTAD model. Colin was brave enough to step up and say, I will lead this work group. There are a number of people who are on his work group. If any of you would like to support his work in figuring out how physical literacy fits into an age-appropriate model and what the ask is of sport organizations, contact him or myself, and we'll work from there. So I'm sorry, I should have prefaced the whole, I should have set it up this way. But
well, I'm a facilitator. I love to collaborate with multiple organizations on a really great common cause, and this certainly is one of those. What again, for me, it resonates about physical literacy is that it encourages the multi-sport sampling at those early ages, and really has some excellent research behind the benefits of doing such. There is a desire to create athleticism in every individual. Every child should strive to be an athlete, and that terminology, and if we look at some of the lessons learned in Canada, they have found that even just using the word athlete development turns off a segment of the population, and they go to terms like participant development. And when we talk about creating a model, you know, that's my question. Are we creating an athlete development model? Are we creating a participant model? What's the correct vocabulary? And I think that's very important. Physical literacy, whatever we call the development model, focuses in the early stages of that development model where sport sampling and exposures for kids to multiple environments is the area of focus, at least for this work group. So a couple of the ideas, just to throw them out there and then provide a little dialogue. A couple of us have felt that there needs to be very easily accessible collection of well thought out physical literacy materials, and that it's available for a variety of community organizations to be able to apply in their own setting. And how do we prop this up? How do we give it a seal of approval? Because it is necessary for a lot of those organizations to view this is the model, this is best practices that should be applied in our community. And so we are beginning to generate dialogue. How would we do that?
Yeah.
And is physical literacy a component of the early stages of this broader model that we're trying to create?
Maybe that's part of that website.
Yep.
at the end of the day, right?
Yep.
Yeah, that's where
easily accessible and And again, given that it speaks to a wide variety of user groups in the community, toolkits, resource availabilities of ideas that could be applied by groups who had the interest to do this in a community. In school environments, Robin Shepper and I have shared a common interest of saying and believing that there can't be a top-down approach to saying this is how things ought to be done in America. But what we do like is if we look at academic curriculum and the common core curriculum of things like math, you have states who adopt a common core curriculum, and other states look at that and they will adopt that, and it kind of builds upon itself. Why not view that we should create a common core curriculum for physical literacy that we put on par or near on par, the same as reading literacy and numeracy? And that, in the school setting, is, as you know, especially important for that elementary to middle school environment for kids to learn. And those environments are ripe for receiving some additional focus and support. And how do we look at applying and creating this curriculum? And there has been examples, I think Dean and Aspen highlighted, physical literacy assessments. And perhaps there are certain benchmarks that need to be met before a child advances to the next level, whatever that might mean.
Let me jump. Yep. I want to bring Shelley into the conversation real quickly. Shelley, how does that tie in with what the President's Council is now doing with the revised presidential youth fitness test?
Sure.
And could that be built into what you're talking about?
Yeah, I think there are synergies. I think there's synergies to a lot of what we're talking about, and certainly Paul can weigh in as well as a strong partner with us. But for those of you that don't know, we've recently sunsetted our youth fitness tests. Remember the test? Most of you in this room probably like the test, right? Because you're athletes. So we have replaced our test, which had standards that were 25 years old and was normative based. So by design, 50% of kids would fail, and many of them were humiliated on top of it in their failing. But in its place, we've replaced it with an assessment called Fitnessgram that's been around for 30 years. It really focuses on health-related fitness. Health-related fitness. It also is criterion referenced instead of normative based, instead of being based on the bell curve. So we now have adopted criteria that is age appropriate, that we're encouraging kids to be in a healthy fitness zone for aerobic capacity and muscular strength, muscular endurance, flexibility, and so on. And so we feel like this is a huge step forward. The focus really is on the masses of kids, if you will, and it's focused on what it means to be healthy and what it will mean to be healthy as kids grow into adults. So I think the whole physical literacy notion is something we're very interested in, and interested in exploring how we can engage with this. I know Paul has had some preliminary, discussions with his membership, which largely are physical and health educators. So be interesting to get his perspective as well. I'm very concerned about physical education in our country, and I don't disagree with Chris that sometimes the sports-related organizations are now being asked to take on more because kids are not getting PE in schools. That's unacceptable to me, and I think that certainly that's perhaps interwoven certainly into some of these conversations. But there's a lot broken about physical education as well, and it feeds into certainly the brokenness of some of the things that we're talking about here. So we're very much interested in this. And just to piggyback on one more thing, and I think the importance of one voice is going to be really, really important. to the extent that we can use the imprimatur of the President's Council on Fitness, Sports, and Nutrition, which has been around since 1956, to the extent that we can amplify what the work that is being done here and the outcomes of the work that you all that work at the grassroots, but to the extent that we can amplify that, we are ready, willing, and able to do that.
Gotcha. Paul, real quickly, I mean, is there any chance that we could build, physical literacy into Common Core standards with schools?
I think we need to think out of the box a little bit. We've all talked about in the past physical education as not only, as Shelley says, parts of it are broken, but also there's a bit of a stigma. The term physical education has kind of a negative connotation. I don't know how many of you watch television. There are not a lot of real great role models in physical education on television and TV shows. But it goes on, and some of us have had bad experiences in physical education. So I think that we need to look at things with fresh eyes and do things differently. Physical literacy is something that's come to the forefront in a number of different countries. It started in Great Britain, but I think there's some great things going on in Canada and in Australia and some other countries. New Zealand, did I say New Zealand? Sorry. I think we need to look at things a little bit, sorry. We need to look at things differently, and could that be through the Common Core? We're doing some things with the Common Core right now. We're writing some new materials. That is an area we need to work in, absolutely. We're also looking at our convention to have programs with international exposure to physical literacy and seeing what other countries are doing so we could share that within the United States. We need to all learn from each other. So the whole thing comes back to partnering. This kind of convening of people is the right thing to do because we can all hear what we're doing. We can learn from sports. We can learn from physical literacy. We can learn from physical education. We've all had experiences in a lot of these areas. We need to continue to share and then come up with a common voice. And if we can have one voice that we're all believing in and we can all get behind, I think that's the way to go.
Just picking up on the one voice idea, and Colin, your comment about LTAD and the A for athlete turning off a few people. I think it's so important that we not only agree on what the needle movers are and what we can do collectively to change youth sports, but actually agree how we talk about it. Because we need to think about kids. We have done a lot of work with kids. A few things that we note is that athlete is a turn-off for most kids. Most kids have decided by the age of 9 whether they're an athlete or not. And most kids have decided that they're not an athlete by the age of 9. So any concepts around being an athlete are kind of irrelevant to many kids. Kids also don't like fitness. They don't like exercise. They like watching sports, but again, by quite an early age, they've decided whether they're not going to be an active sports participant or not. Kids love play, but play is most commonly associated with video games than physical activity. So we have noticed as we have been engaging with other organizations within Design to Move that lots of people saying exactly the same thing and using exactly the same vocabulary about an issue is by an order of magnitude more impactful than lots of people saying roughly the same thing and agreeing on roughly the same concepts. So we can see the parallels between physical literacy and the ADM and LTAD, and we can, I think, see those. But if we need to present an ad council campaign, a 60-second campaign or 30-second campaign, then good luck collecting all those into one idea or one thought if we don't align on words, the specific vocabulary. So are we pushing ADM? Are we pushing LTAD? Are we pushing physical literacy? Well, we are, because they're all age appropriate. The closest we have got so far is early positive experiences, which is why anyone who has interacted with me before will know that I try and push that as much as possible, because it's the closest we currently have. But as we decide the thing that we do, we also need to decide how we talk about it and consistently repeat that.
And you guys use LTAD, although it's called the American Development Model. You lose the word athlete in the name of your formal product. Have you found that even having, how do you feel about the use of the word athlete? Is it limiting? Is it empowering? Is it what are the pluses and the minuses?
I don't know.
Because you don't use it in American development model.
We acknowledge that we use LTAD as a background. We use those principles in what we've done, but we don't talk about it as player development because we have hockey players, and so you got to know when you don't know, and here I don't know. So.
Right. Anybody have any other ideas on what to call this thing? Early positive experiences, I like it myself, but I mean, is there sort of a model that did? Yeah.
Just a comment about the word athlete, and I mentioned it, Tom, a second ago. It is an interesting phenomenon. When I do a lot of work with masters athletes, and they don't identify with being athletes because athlete is high performance, and I'll ask them, are you an athlete? It's the first thing I ask when we're consulting about their sport and what's going on. No, I'm not an athlete. Athlete is them. I'm just participating. And they don't even have a name for themselves, which I think is perhaps something that if we can reshape what it means to be an athlete, maybe we need to redefine it. Maybe we need to work on that as opposed to finding a different term.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, maybe we've just been sort of lazy about it and let other folks define what an athlete is. I mean, the idea that if you have a body, you are an athlete. Is there a way to kind of bring back that concept? Nathan.
Yeah, that's, as you just mentioned, Nike's mission statement is to bring innovation and inspiration to every athlete, and we have an asterisk by the athlete, and we further define it as if you have a body, you're an athlete. One of the things that Nike is doing as a brand in support of this movement is broadening the definition of sport and broadening the definition of athletes. And so you might have seen our brand campaign from last year, which was about find greatness. Greatness doesn't exist in one person or one place. Greatness is within all of us. So, in that sense, we are bringing the power of the brand to bear to try and broaden that definition of sport and athlete. It's something of an uphill struggle because I think athleticism and athletes are associated with the very elite. I think it's we run the risk, and I think Chris and the USOC and the NGB Task Force have done great work. We run the risk because it is the USOC and the NGB when we talk about fulfilling people's potential in sport, and we're talking within our own framework rather than saying, okay, it's the USOC and it's the NGBs, but actually we are developing human potential. We're not developing athletic potential. We're not developing people as athletes, and lost the draft statement here, but we do talk about full potential in sport, developing athletes. We're developing people. Sport and play are just a tool to developing people or children. So I'm not sure what the answer is. I don't think we need to throw away athlete necessarily, but we need to make sure that this concept, when we go public with the concept, isn't too easily sort of filed with the world of professional and elite sport. That this is something the USOC, the NGBs, and everyone else around this table have. It's their new way of getting better performance at the Olympics. It can't be that. It has to be a more holistic approach to overall human capital development.
One of the things that I think, and Chris kind of mentioned this, at least from what I'm hearing from coaches that coach at swim clubs, is that they are now the ones that are teaching physical literacy because it's not happening any other place. And so if I extrapolate that even further, that means, in terms of the NGB world, the club system is teaching physical literacy. And I sometimes worry about coaches knowing all that they need to know about swimming, let alone teaching physical literacy. So to me, that's a huge area in terms of Paul that maybe AFERD could help with at the basic level.
What does that mean to the coaches, physical literacy teaching?
Well, I mean, basically that kids are not physically fit when they come in sport, and so they're having to teach them movements, strength, body movement kind of things.
One quick second.
That I think that they never had.
Kurt Camperman has to leave, but thank you again for helping host this meeting. I'm sorry, go on to Tom.
Answer your question, what I meant by that?
Gotcha. My question is this to Chris Snyder. Do you think the NGBs could be sold, and the U.S. Olympic Committee, on the idea that physical literacy should be the priority up through age 12? You know, in Canada, the goal is to have every child physically literate by age 12, and the thought there is this will create alignment, both within the sports structure as well as in the health and the educational structure. Okay, we know what we want to do with kids, you know, up to that age, and beyond that, you're going to, you know, follow the square in whatever manner you is appropriate. But I mean, what's possible? I mean, or does physical literacy sound too squishy and outside of the mission of NGBs? And
no, it's just physical literacy is an advanced way of talking about motor skills and the development of athletes. And if you can't crawl, you can't walk, you can't run. And our task force has already talked about that, of how does this become included in these beginner stages of whatever the design becomes. And as you listen to the feedback from, you know, our friends up north, and where they've run into some problems is, well, not acknowledging both sides of the whole path line, not acknowledging their own the podium program at the highest levels, and not connecting that back into their athlete development model that's there. As well as now they're going back to add physical literacy. They need to clarify a whole bunch of different things to make this pipeline. It's going to take more than just our task force to come up with what's the right system for America. And I think, yes, like Colin and I have already talked on the phone before coming here about how do these things line up. And I agree with Paul that our partnerships are going to be a way that this then gets implemented and also built the right manner for everyone to take advantage. And it even could be a project that comes out of these meetings where we come back and we keep showing our own progression of what's going on. Even as I've referenced before about what the NKC group's doing and AFERD's doing around gathering the information, what they're going to put out to their membership. This really could be an avenue for us to constantly check in and check off on how things are going, adding physical literacy to, even to Nathan's point, how we name this darn thing, because again, what's in a name, it means a lot. We're speaking on the same language. So yes, 100%, it has a place in it. We need to find that together so that we can move forward and come up with what's the best thing moving forward.
Yeah, Colin.
One of and speaking with the architects of the physical literacy materials in Canada, one of the things they lamented, or a lesson learned from their perspective, and things that they very much highlighted to me, is education isn't enough. The materials isn't enough, and it needs to be tied to actual programs and efforts in local communities, and that any effort we would do needs to think about the implementation phase and not just creating really good materials. And for me, it's got me thinking, in our culture, in our community dynamics, how do we, we're all doing sort of filling voids in the communities. My skating instructors are the PE classes for 3 local elementary schools, and we're doing that because there's a void. If we get a physical literacy work group in every community, we have to recognize every community is different. But if these principles want to be applied, what's the structure in communities to gather a working group of collaborative organizations? Who's the leader? Who's doing that? And what goals are we trying to achieve? If we can lay out the goals, maybe suggest some of typical community organizations involved in promoting physical literacy, but really the application is really tailored by a particular region or community, that's the part that we're going to be digging into with the work group, and very curious of how we take steps and actionable steps, and not just lay out a bunch of materials that say these are the right things.
Gotcha. We have to wrap up here in a minute, but let's see, Sharon?
I would just do a push for the physical literacy. I really do like that term. I think it is what it says. One of the things Chris said I want to just push back on, and I won't be able to quote you on this, but sort of physical literacy, getting people ready to be athletes. I don't think so. I think when we talk about financial literacy, we're not getting people ready to be investors. We're getting them to a stage where they understand what money is and how it works, right? So to me, literacy is about, it's a knowing, it's establishing a baseline, it's getting some of the mechanics down about whatever the topic is. Reading literacy, you know, take it the way we've used literacy. Again, I'll stress on sort of that knowing. The physical literacy brings to the physical side on it. It's a competency, and I think that's what we're getting at. And whether you use that competency then to go on to become an athlete, great, some people will do that. You use that competency to be active for the rest of your life, you do that. You use that competency to play sports for fun, you do that. But I like the term physical literacy, and I think it's something that, you know, we're talking more and more about literacy in different subjects, so why not physical literacy?
Got it. See, Dean, who's been quiet, he's a man of many thoughts. I sat next to him at dinner last night, and you've shown much restraint so far. And what do you have to say?
Listen, I have written down a lot of thoughts. I know I got briefed before I came here to speak slowly because Kiwis do speak very quickly. So I'm just going to talk just quickly on a couple of things. I love what Tim spoke of earlier on, that art of coaching. It's not taught to teachers, and that art of coaching. And just there, which, sorry, Sharon?
Dean, real quickly, I want to, before Andrea Yeager is leaving, I want to thank her for joining us.
Thank you.
Terrific real-world perspective as an athlete. Thank you. Thank you, Andrea.
That how it's skinned, everyone will take their own artistry to it and apply that. But if you've got that common message, and having worked in a number of different countries, and I've only recently been in this country, it's very different, the culture here. So speaking as an outsider, the dollar bill drives a huge amount of what occurs within sport. And I understand that, and that's fine, but making sure that we've got that same verbiage across everybody's own artistry of delivery is great. Two key things there, Colin. Common sense. You've used it in some of your literature here, and you say it. It is common sense. It's actually really simple. And if you can get everyone to play in the sandbox nicely, which I've been involved in, it's not very easy. It's a big leap of faith. And if everyone can hold hands and take that leap of faith, these things become popular thought. And what David has written in his book, what you've written, Tom, and a number of other people, it becomes common voice, it becomes common thought. And that's when it becomes powerful, because it becomes organic. And whichever messaging is delivered, the hard-hitting, as you spoke of, Sue, it's about making sure we've got a really holistic approach. I love the 7 design filters. I think it's a common sense approach, but it doesn't mean it's the only way, but it means people will skin it differently. But if at a point in time, as a species, we can say, right, here is the stake in the sand, then we can actually move forward together. I think there's been some wonderful thoughts here. Absolute privilege to be here, but this wisdom that we've accumulated over these years, and which is in the room, and the passing of that knowledge, at some point, we've got to stop talking and give something actually at. You spoke of the coalface, Nathan. It's actually boots on the ground. It's that person with something in their hand, that coach at whichever level who's willing to give their time so they can be better skilled. So at some point, that's got to occur. So that would be my one thing, that it's got to be one voice, and we've got to play in the sandbox nicely.
Okay. Want to bring it.